What sucks when you get married? Finding out that your in-laws, who put up with you and tried to act nice till you got married, are really assholes that normal people don't want to deal with. My buddy invited me to 2 BBQs weekends, one right after the other, and told me if I could only make one, make the second one. He invited the in-laws to the first and warned people. It was sort of like an aquarium, people were watching them. One guy kept bringing up gold and I didn't understand until the father-in-law went off that gold was a scam, that Fort Knox was robbed long ago, etc. etc. Second weekend was twice as packed with a much more diverse crowd. I'd always heard that my MIL was controlling and narcissistic, but never really saw it. I thought it was cute, if maybe a bit weird, when we first got married and she started calling us both my kids. I did not realize she meant that, as in I had literally become her property. That relationship went downhill to LC like a grease sled on an icy hill. ETA, edited to @LC equals low contact, MAL equals mother-in-law. I thought my wife's mom was pretty cool and her dad was an asshole. They divorced a few years after my wife and I started dating, and for a while it seemed like they were both alright. On the 4th of July, we were at her mom's with my 3 kids, previous marriage, and her new boyfriend dumped a bucket of water, full of gunpowder and paper scraps and shit from extinguishing fireworks in it, over my 10-year-old daughter's head, as a joke, because he was drunk as fuck. I lost it on him, called him a fucking asshole, and as soon as my daughter was out of the shower we left. After that her mom basically stopped talking to her except to send a terse obligatory invite for Christmas. I found out then that her mom had been a narcissistic abuser who targeted my wife over her siblings consistently for decades. My wife went no contact with one of her sisters, then her mom, and then the other sister, leaving just her brother and her dad, who had started being really cool and trying to be involved, and it was nice. And then her dad, explicitly against my wife's requests, told her mom that she is pregnant. My wife instantly cut him off. Her brother started talking about how anyone who wasn't supporting him, which to him meant ignoring his alcoholism, was his enemy, and making vaguely threatening statements. Her grandmother is a right-wing anti-vax nutjob. Her other grandmother shamed her for not shaving her armpits or legs while she was going through a nasty bout of skin problems, so my wife shaved her head out of spite. LMAO. Her one grandfather is a gun nut who showed nudes of women he found online to my wife when she was 13. We don't talk to literally any of her family anymore, and our lives are mostly better for it. For better or worse includes the worse. When your spouse has a chronic health issue, a mental health issue, substance abuse problems, you have committed to be there for at least a reasonable effort in carrying through it together. That can be taxing beyond belief. Yeah, a dead kid, and a lot of mental health issues later, we're still hanging on to each other for dear life, but we ain't the people we were when we got married. There's an episode of Mad About You where Jamie has good news but Paul got devastated by losing a job, or maybe it was the other way around. Anyway, Jamie struggles at first, but ultimately decides to put her celebratory mood away, and just be present with Paul. That's not what marriage should always look like, but it does show the kind of selflessness that makes things work, when both people are doing that for each other. Friends of ours had a stillborn years ago. It took them a long time to get over it. Well, not really get over it, just to be able to deal with it in a healthy way. The wife now does speaking tours and has become a top seller of the book she wrote for about it. So they were able to make something good eventually come out of it. It was rough for a while though. If it's forever, one of you is likely to die first. It wasn't me. Sorry for your loss. This is really the most legitimate answer. Sorry for your loss. I think this story from Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl might make you feel better. Once, an elderly general practitioner consulted me because of his severe depression. He could not overcome the loss of his wife who had died 2 years before and whom he had loved above all else. Now, how can I help him? What should I tell him? Well, I refrained from telling him anything but instead confronted him with the question, what would have happened, doctor, if you had died first, and your wife would have had to survive you? Oh, he said, for her this would have been terrible, how she would have suffered. Whereupon I replied, you see, doctor, such a suffering has been spared her, and it was you who have spared her this suffering, to be sure, at the price that now you have to survive and mourn her. He said no word but shook my hand and calmly left my office. In some way, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. It sucks when your partner and sometimes you get too comfortable and complacent. You start slacking on the little things that matter to each other. No one likes to have to remind their partner to do things they used to do automatically. It's worse when one person slacks and the other doesn't. There are so many things where my wife and I are supposed to alternate with: date nights, vacations, getting up with the kids, intimacy, but I do half and she never reciprocates. Like you said, it's tough to remind your partner. You either feel awkward asking for expected behavior or feel like you're nagging. I'm the wife that desperately tried to keep things spicy and fun only to be met years later after begging him to do the same with, "Well, I just thought saying I love you was enough. I'm excited to be alone." Being partnered with someone that you're more interested in than they are in themselves is torture. Intimacy isn't just physical, it's psychological, emotional, and mental, and requires communication through depth of understanding of yourself firstly, and your partner secondly. This cuts deep. Mine doesn't even say I love you. Once I stopped saying it, it stopped altogether. I'm part of the furniture. I'm still married and I've never felt so alone in my life. I ache when you go through rough patches with your spouse. Maybe you aren't spending enough quality time together, because life, or not having sex enough. So you fight/bicker more. Little annoyances become bigger problems. Until you finally talk through it and things get back on track. Or they don't and it all falls apart, but that is life too. Figuring out the balance between together time and alone time that works for both of you. Figuring out that it's okay to say, "Do you just want a vent, or do you want me to provide a solution when your spouse goes off?" Why does that suck? Those realizations don't happen super early in marriage, so you realize all the lost time and go, damn. Having to split the holidays between the in-laws and always having someone mad because you can't be at two places at once. Sucks. Because all you want is a peaceful time. It gets worse once you have kids. They all want to see the kids, of course. We've since moved away from everyone and still get harassed about visiting, but with our health issues, it's hard to travel, so too bad, so sad. LOL. This bothers me. The amount of "it's been 2 months, 11 days, 3 hours and 41 minutes since we saw grandchild run" is absurd. You guys are retired. There's a lane in the road that comes specifically to our house and you can feel free to use it whenever you want. A note for grandparents out there: life is busy. We're more than willing to accommodate you, but we can't always be the ones to travel 4 hours because there's a lot going on. Or the whole "you never call anymore" fun fact. My phone can receive calls. It's the same number since high school to mom. Yes. Don't even get me started on that one. My brother often calls me and tells me to call my parents because they said they haven't heard from us in a while. I could be way out of line here, but I'm pretty sure their brand new phones have FaceTime just the same as ours. For a while we lived about 800 miles away from my parents, and just as an experiment we decided to see how long it would take them to call us instead of us calling them. We didn't hear a word from them via text, phone, FaceTime, or otherwise for 3.5 months. Your spouse's family problems become yours. This is the biggest one, even in great relationships. All the annoying little quirks that your family members have are now twice as noticeable to your spouse, and vice versa. Amplified when you have kids. Little quirks. Or worse. My parents are mentally ill. I warned my spouse, and he met them. We failed to prepare his mother. I spent the rest of that marriage with my email saying, "I just can't understand why your parents would act that way. Come on. I'm sorry, I know their behavior is atrocious, and I'm glad they went and see Whitney, but you're a psychologist, I think you'd at least understand why they are acting that way." Bruh, the amount of people who are psychologists and still can't understand those things baffles me. It often attracts folks who are more analytical than empathetic. Plenty of people are quite intelligent, but lack emotional intelligence. This sounds exactly like my dad. He is a psychologist and has a shocking lack of empathy for certain people, like other family members, who are dealing with mental/emotional issues. I know a few people who became licensed therapists, all of which are highly empathetic. They all switched careers within a few years. For the empathetic, it's highly exhausting. I could imagine that for the less empathetic therapist, it's just a job.